Since Ed is on vacation, I'm going to put a spin on his playbook and call it my nerd book this week. So, in tonight's nerd book, some members of Congress have had enough of pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into Afghanistan while the U.S. has 10% unemployment and deficits. Congressman Nita Lowey of New York, head of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations, says she refuses to give, quote, one more dime in aid to Afghanistan until President Hamid Karzai takes a stand against corruption. She said, full quote, too many Americans are suffering in this economy for us to put their hard-earned tax dollars into the hands of criminals overseas. The chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Congressman David Obey, went further, saying he would block war funding until Congress extends unemployment benefits. And the Pentagon seems to understand that its days of receiving blank checks from Congress are numbered. An effort is underway to slice more than $100 billion from its budget over the next few years. Joining me now for more on this is syndicated columnist David Sirota, who wrote a great column about guns and butter this week. David, thanks a lot for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
David, you wrote about the fact that we've sort of avoided the traditional guns butter decision over the last few years, and that at some point we're going to have to face up to it. Do you really think we are, or are we going to keep punting this?
I think we are. I think that what you've seen is not just a call for a guns versus butter debate by traditional liberals like David Obey and like Nita Lowey, but what's interesting to me is that you're seeing people like Senator Tom Coburn, the right-wing Republican from Oklahoma, using his position on the president's budget commission to call for an audit of Pentagon spending. You've heard Secretary of Defense Robert Gates say that he wants to cut $100 billion out of the Pentagon's administrative costs. Maybe it's not war costs, but at least that's something. You've even seen a Politico story about the Tea Party folks saying, and this is organizers, not candidates, but at least organizers saying that if we're going to have a serious discussion about spending, we're spending right now a single TARP, one bank bailout a year, $700 billion now on the Pentagon every year. And if you're going to have a discussion about spending, you need to have a discussion about how much we're overspending on the Pentagon.
Do you think, I mean, one of the things I always wonder about this is the degree to which there's public recognition of the numbers. I mean, the numbers get big and then it's diffused. People understandably don't have a great handle on the federal budget. Do you think that folks realize how much we are spending on both the wars specifically, but just generally in defense? It's gone up something like almost 100% since 2000.
Right. National Journal recently reported that President Obama is on track to become, in a single term, the largest amount of defense spending since World War II. I think you're right. I think the public doesn't necessarily understand when you hear $1 billion, $100 billion, $700 billion, $1 trillion. It gets very confusing. Here's what I think the public does understand. They do understand that we are in a recession. They do understand that we are spending more on our defense, right now, than almost every other industrialized nation in the world combined. And when you hear comparative numbers like that, I think people really understand it. And they understand that especially when it comes to war funding, the funding of actual occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's not necessarily money to build jobs, defense industry jobs in congressional districts. That's money that's literally going out of the country and leaving the country for good.
You worked for David Obey, and you talked about him in your column. What do you expect to see out of him in the next month or so?
Well, he's retiring, and I think that in some ways there's a kind of a throw caution to the wind attitude. Although if anybody who knows David Obey knows that he's sort of had that for a while, in a good way. And I think now with the president so aggressively pushing for an escalation, pushing now a another $33 billion spending bill for the Afghanistan war, I think Obey means what he says when he says we're not going to cut another check for this war in specific until we get real jobless benefits, until we get a real jobless program. We should be spending at least as much on creating jobs here at home as we are sending to Afghanistan. Agreed.
David Sirota, syndicated columnist, radio host in the Denver area. You should check him out if you're lucky enough to live there. Thanks a lot.